Millionaire bumps into homeless woman on the street and is shocked. She's his childhood sweetheart. Helping her up, he's stunned by what she says. Get ready for a journey full of nostalgia and incredible twists. Today's story is truly remarkable, with an ending that's sure to touch your heart and leave you amazed. So, stay with me until the very last moment. I hope this experience is unforgettable for you, and may God bless you and your family. Now, let's get started. On a crisp autumn morning in 1987, New York City, Thomas Harrison stepped out of his gleaming black Mercedes, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the crowded sidewalk of Fifth Avenue. At 45, he was the epitome of success, CEO of Harrison Technologies, one of the fastest-growing computer companies in America. His tailored Armani suit and perfectly groomed appearance reflected the meticulous control he maintained over every aspect of his life. That control shattered in an instant. Rushing to a board meeting, Thomas rounded the corner near Trump Tower, his mind preoccupied with quarterly reports and profit margins. He collided with someone, a woman in tattered clothes, sending her stumbling backward. As he reached out instinctively to stop her fall, their eyes met. Time stopped. Those eyes. He knew those eyes. Behind the dirt and exhaustion, beneath the years of hardship etched into her face, he recognized Sarah Mitchell, his high school sweetheart from Small Springs, Colorado, the girl who used to wear ribbon barrettes and listen to Cyndi Lauper, the girl who taught him to dance to Time After Time in her parents' garage, the girl who disappeared without a trace the summer before college. Sarah. His voice cracked, barely a whisper. She stared back, recognition flickering across her weathered features. Tommy? Her voice was hoarse, but it held the same soft lilt he remembered from stolen moments behind the bleachers, sharing dreams over shared Coca-Colas in glass bottles. Around them, New York continued its frantic pace. Yuppies with massive mobile phones, tourists snapping photos with their Kodak cameras, street vendors selling hot dogs and pretzels. But Thomas and Sarah remained frozen in their own pocket of time, decades of questions hanging in the air between them. I thought you were dead, Thomas managed, his carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. Sarah's lips trembled as she formed words that would haunt him. Sometimes, Tommy, I wish I was. The woman he once loved, who taught him to slow dance to REO Speedwagon and shared his first kiss under the stars at the drive-in theater, was now clutching a worn garbage bag of possessions, wearing clothes that had seen better days during the Carter administration. Let me help you, Thomas said, reaching for her arm. But Sarah pulled back, fear flashing across her face. You can't help me, Tommy. No one can. They'll kill him if they find out I'm alive. Before Thomas could process her words, Sarah turned and fled into the crowd, leaving him standing there, his hand still outstretched, as Madonna's Open Your Heart played from a nearby store's speakers, a cruel reminder of simpler times. Thomas watched her disappear into the sea of faces, his mind racing with questions. Who would kill who? What happened to the girl who once painted peace signs on her jeans and dreamed of becoming a teacher? How did his first love end up on the streets of New York? Standing there on that busy Manhattan sidewalk, Thomas Harrison made a decision. The board meeting could wait. For the first time in 15 years, something mattered more than quarterly reports and profit margins. He had to find out what happened to Sarah Mitchell. What he didn't know was that this chance encounter would unravel a web of secrets that had been carefully hidden since that summer night in 1972, when Sarah vanished without a trace, secrets that powerful people would kill to keep buried. Thomas spent the next 3 days searching the streets near Trump Tower, his Mercedes crawling past alleyways and homeless shelters. The city seemed different now, no longer just a backdrop for business deals and power lunches at Maxwell's Plum. Each doorway, each shadowy corner might be hiding Sarah. His secretary at Harrison Technologies kept calling his car phone, but the plastic handset remained untouched. The board members could handle themselves. For the first time since founding his company, Thomas felt the hollowness of his success. What good was his penthouse overlooking Central Park when Sarah was sleeping on concrete? On the 4th day, he found her huddled in a doorway near St. Patrick's Cathedral, clutching a worn backpack. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile. The confident girl who used to challenge him to Pac-Man tournaments at the arcade was gone, replaced by someone who seemed to want to disappear into the shadows. "Sarah," he called softly, approaching slowly like one might a frightened animal. "Please, let me help." She looked up, her eyes darting past him, scanning the street. "You shouldn't be here, Tommy. You need to forget you saw me." But Thomas wasn't leaving, not this time. He sat down beside her on the cold steps, ignoring the curious stares from passers-by. His $2,000 suit gathered dirt, but he didn't care. "Remember when your car broke down on prom night?" he said quietly. "That old Chevette your dad bought you? We sat on the side of Miller's Road for 2 hours, listening to the radio and watching the stars. You said it was better than any dance could have been." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "You were wearing that powder blue tuxedo." "With the ruffled shirt," Thomas added. "I thought I looked like John Travolta." "You looked like a blueberry muffin," Sarah said. And for a moment, he heard the echo of the girl she used to be. The moment passed, and fear crept back into her eyes. "Tommy, you don't understand." "I can't." "Then help me understand," he pressed. "What happened that night, Sarah? You just vanished. Your parents were devastated. The whole town searched for weeks." Sarah's hands trembled as she gripped her backpack tighter. "I saw something I shouldn't have. At the factory. Mr. Jenkins, he wasn't just storing furniture in those warehouses." Thomas remembered George Jenkins, owner of the largest furniture factory in Small Springs. The man had employed half the town, including Sarah's father. He died in a car accident in '75. "What did you see?" Sarah shook her head. "They found me before I could tell anyone. Said they'd hurt my family if I didn't disappear. They gave me 2 hours to leave town." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't even say goodbye to my parents. I just left." "But that was 15 years ago," Thomas protested. "Jenkins is dead." "Jenkins was just a front man," Sarah whispered. "The others, they're still watching. Last year, I thought it was safe. I tried to contact my sister Jenny. 2 days later, my friend Kevin, another homeless man who helped me survive out here, he had an accident. They pushed him in front of a subway train." Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October air. "The police. Are you that naive, Tommy? These people have money. Real money. Not furniture store money. The kind that makes problems disappear." A group of teenagers walked past, their boombox blaring Bon Jovi's "Livin' on a Prayer." The irony wasn't lost on Thomas. "Come with me," he said suddenly. "I have a penthouse with security, private guards. You'll be safe there." Sarah laughed, a hollow sound. "Look at you, Tommy, still trying to fix everything. Some things can't be fixed. Some secrets need to stay buried." "I'm not that 16-year-old boy anymore," Thomas said firmly. "I have resources now, connections. Whatever you saw, whoever these people are, we can fight them." "And what about Michael?" Sarah's voice broke. "Michael? My son." Sarah pulled a worn photograph from her backpack. It showed a boy about 13, with Sarah's eyes and a serious expression. "He's safe, hidden away at a boarding school upstate. As long as I stay invisible, they leave him alone. I can't risk his life, Tommy, I won't." Thomas stared at the photograph, his mind racing. A son. Sarah had been living on the streets while somehow maintaining a child's safety at a boarding school. The complexity of her situation began to dawn on him. How do you afford—" "I don't," Sarah said quietly. "Someone pays for it. Every year, the tuition is covered anonymously. I think it's their way of keeping me quiet. As long as I stay away from Michael, stay homeless and discredited, they make sure he's taken care of." Thomas felt anger rising in his chest. Someone had destroyed Sarah's life, separated her from her child, and kept her living in fear for 15 years, and they were using her son's safety to maintain their control. "There has to be a way," he insisted. "Let me help you. Both of you." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, and he saw a flicker of the girl who never backed down from a challenge. But then she stood, gathering her meager possessions. "I've already said too much. Please, Tommy, if you ever loved me, forget you saw me. Forget everything I told you. Live your life." She turned to leave, but Thomas caught her hand. It was rough now, so different from the soft hands that used to slip notes into his locker between classes. "At least take this," he said, pulling out his business card and scribbling his home number on the back. "Day or night, if you need anything." Sarah hesitated, then took the card, tucking it into her coat. Without another word, she merged into the crowd of fashionable New Yorkers heading home from work. The contrast between her worn clothes and their expensive outfits made Thomas's heart ache. As he watched her disappear, Thomas made another decision. Sarah might think some secrets needed to stay buried, but he hadn't built a successful company by accepting defeat. Whatever she had seen in that warehouse 15 years ago was still destroying her life, and Thomas Harrison was going to find out what it was. What he didn't realize was that his simple act of kindness, giving Sarah his card, had already set in motion events that would soon spiral beyond his control. Someone had been watching their entire conversation, and within hours, a phone call would be made to a very exclusive office in Manhattan. The past was about to collide with the present, and not everyone would survive the impact. That evening, Thomas sat in his penthouse office, surrounded by the trappings of success that suddenly felt meaningless. The Manhattan skyline glittered outside his window, while Phil Collins played softly on his expensive stereo system. His mind kept returning to Sarah, trying to piece together the puzzle. He pulled out his old high school yearbook from 1972, carefully preserved in a box of memories he rarely opened. Sarah's photo showed a beautiful girl with bright eyes and an infectious smile, her hair styled like Karen Carpenter's. The caption read, "Most likely to change the world." The irony made his chest tight. The telephone rang, startling him from his thoughts. It was nearly midnight. "Mr. Harrison?" The voice was elderly, familiar. "This is Frank Cooper. I used to work maintenance at Jenkins' furniture factory." Thomas sat up straighter. "Yes, I remember you. Mr. Cooper. I saw you today, talking to Sarah Mitchell." The old man's voice trembled. "I've been carrying this weight for 15 years. Maybe it's time someone knew the truth." Thomas grabbed a pen. "I'm listening." "Not on the phone," Cooper insisted. "Meet me tomorrow morning. The diner on 54th Street, 6 a.m. before the business crowd arrives." He paused. "And Mr. Harrison, come alone. If they think I'm talking—" The line went dead. Sleep eluded Thomas that night. He kept seeing Sarah's face, hearing her words about her son, Michael. By 5:30 a.m., he was sitting in Mel's diner, nursing a cup of black coffee. The place was nearly empty, save for a couple of taxi drivers and a waitress who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. Frank Cooper arrived precisely at 6, wearing a worn jacket and carrying a beaten-up briefcase. He slid into the booth across from Thomas, his weathered hands shaking slightly as he ordered coffee. "I was there that night," Cooper said quietly, once the waitress was out of earshot. "The night Sarah disappeared, I was working late, fixing a broken heater in the back office." He pulled an envelope from his briefcase. "I saw her come in. She was dropping off papers for her father. He worked in accounting, but she took a wrong turn, ended up in the wrong warehouse." "What was in the warehouse?" Thomas asked. Cooper glanced nervously at the door. "Shipping manifests. Records. Jenkins wasn't just moving furniture. The factory was a front for something bigger. Money laundering, I think. Millions of dollars. Maybe more. Sarah, she saw the books. Really saw them." "For who?" Thomas pressed. "I don't know names," Cooper said, "but there were men in expensive suits who came at night. They'd meet in Jenkins' office. One of them, he had a distinctive ring, gold, with a black stone. I saw it clearly one night when he handed me an envelope full of cash, told me to forget what I'd seen." Thomas felt his pulse quicken. "What happened to Sarah that night?" "They caught her in the warehouse. I was a coward. I hid, but I heard everything." Cooper's voice cracked. "They gave her a choice, disappear or her whole family would have accidents. They even knew where her little sister went to school." "But why keep watching her all these years later?" Cooper leaned forward. "Because of what was in those records. Names, dates, amounts. The kind of information that could destroy powerful people. They weren't sure how much she'd seen or if she'd made copies. As long as she's homeless and discredited, who'd believe her?" The waitress approached with a coffee pot. Cooper fell silent until she left. There's something else, he continued, about her son, Michael. Suddenly, Cooper's face went pale. Through the diner's window, Thomas saw a black Lincoln Continental slowly cruising past. Cooper shoved the envelope across the table. I've said too much. The information's in here, but be careful, Mr. Harrison. These people, they're still out there, still powerful. He stood abruptly, leaving his coffee untouched. Wait, Thomas called. What about Michael? But Cooper was already hurrying out the door. Thomas watched through the window as the old man disappeared down the street. The black Lincoln was nowhere in sight. Back in his office, Thomas opened Cooper's envelope with trembling hands. Inside were photocopies of old documents, their edges worn and faded, shipping records and banking statements, handwritten notes, and a photograph that made his blood run cold. It showed a much younger Sarah with a small boy, Michael as a toddler. But it was the man standing next to them that caught Thomas's attention. He wore an expensive suit and a familiar gold ring with a black stone. The same ring Thomas had seen just last week, on the hand of his company's largest investor, Victor Caldwell. The pieces started falling into place. The anonymous boarding school payments, the continued surveillance of Sarah, the convenient death of Jenkins in '75. Thomas's intercom buzzed, "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Caldwell is here for your 10 o'clock appointment." Thomas stared at the photograph, his mind racing. Caldwell had invested millions in Harrison Technologies when they were just starting out. Had that money come from the same operation that destroyed Sarah's life? "Mr. Harrison?" his secretary repeated. "Send him in," Thomas said finally, sliding the documents into his desk drawer. He had to play this carefully. One wrong move could put both Sarah and Michael in danger. As Victor Caldwell strode into the office, his gold ring catching the morning light, Thomas realized he was now part of a game that had been playing out for 15 years, and the stakes were life and death. What he didn't know was that at that very moment, Sarah was making a discovery of her own, one that would force them all into a confrontation that could no longer be avoided. Victor Caldwell settled into the leather chair across from Thomas's desk, his perfectly tailored suit and carefully groomed silver hair, projecting an aura of refined power. The gold ring glinted as he reached for a cigar from his pocket. "Thomas, my boy," he said warmly, "I hear you've been distracted lately. Missing board meetings, wandering the streets." He lit the cigar with a gold lighter. "That's not like you." Thomas maintained a neutral expression, though his heart was pounding. "Just checking on some personal investments." "Ah," Caldwell smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You know, I've always considered you like a son. When I invested in Harrison Technologies back in '82, everyone said I was crazy. A small computer company in a market dominated by IBM." He chuckled. "But I saw something in you, drive, determination, intelligence." He paused, studying Thomas. "But intelligence can be dangerous when applied to the wrong things." Before Thomas could respond, his secretary buzzed again. "Mr. Harrison, there's a call from Westbrook Academy. They say it's urgent." Westbrook Academy. The pieces clicked. That must be Michael's school. "Excuse me," Thomas said to Caldwell, picking up the phone. "Mr. Harrison," a worried female voice spoke. "This is Mrs. Peters from Westbrook. I'm calling because Michael Mitchell didn't show up for classes today. When we checked his room, it was empty. His roommate says he left a note mentioning New York City." Thomas's blood ran cold. Michael had run away, probably to find his mother, a 13-year-old boy alone in 1987 New York, with no idea of the dangers involved. "Thank you for letting me know," Thomas said carefully, aware of Caldwell's watchful gaze. "Please keep me informed." He hung up, his mind racing. He had to find Michael before Caldwell's people did. "Trouble?" Caldwell asked, tapping ash from his cigar. "Nothing serious." "Their minor issue with a tech supplier." Thomas forced a smile. "Now, about those quarterly projections—" But Caldwell raised his hand. "Let's stop pretending, Thomas. We both know you've been talking to Sarah Mitchell." His voice hardened. "That was a mistake." "She's homeless, Victor, hardly a threat to anyone. Is that what Frank Cooper told you this morning?" Thomas felt his stomach drop. They'd been watching him all along. Caldwell stood, walking to the window. It's a shame about Frank, a heart attack, right there in the street after leaving the diner. Natural causes went, of course. Man, his age, all that stress. The threat was clear. Thomas thought of the documents in his desk, of Sarah hiding in the city's shadows, of young Michael somewhere in the concrete jungle. "What do you want, Victor?" Caldwell turned, his expression almost paternal. "I want you to be smart. Focus on your company. Forget about Sarah Mitchell and whatever stories you've heard. Some doors are better left closed. And if I don't, then I'll have to close them myself." Caldwell crushed out his cigar. "Harrison Technologies has been very successful, Thomas. It would be tragic if something happened to damage that success. Computer companies are so vulnerable. A failed product launch, a sudden market crash, a scandal involving the CEO." He walked to the door, then paused. "Oh, and Thomas, if you happen to hear from young Michael, do let me know. I am his father, after all." The door closed behind him, leaving Thomas in stunned silence. Caldwell was Michael's father. The pieces fell into place. The boarding school payments, the continued surveillance, the need to keep Sarah isolated and discredited. Thomas grabbed his car keys and coat. He had to find Michael before Caldwell's men did. But New York was massive, a maze of streets and shadows. Where would a scared 13-year-old boy go looking for his mother? The answer hit him: St. Patrick's Cathedral, where he'd last seen Sarah. Racing through midtown traffic in his Mercedes, Thomas's mind whirled. The old Pontiac Trans Am ahead of him had a "Where's the Beef?" bumper sticker, and a group of teenagers walked past wearing Miami Vice-style pastel suits. The normal rhythm of 1987, New York continued while his world spun out of control. He spotted Michael before reaching the cathedral, a lanky boy in a prep school uniform, looking lost and scared on the crowded sidewalk. Thomas pulled over, jumping out. "Michael!" The boy turned, startled. He had Sarah's eyes. "How do you know my name?" Michael backed away. "I'm a friend of your mother's. You're in danger. Please, let me help." "I don't believe you." But Michael's voice wavered. "Where is she?" "I'm trying to find her too, but there are men looking for you. Dangerous men, including Victor Caldwell." Michael's face paled at the name. "You know about him?" "Yes, and I know why your mother's been hiding all these years. Please, come with me. We'll find her together, but first we need to get you somewhere safe." A black Lincoln Continental turned onto the street. Michael saw it too. "Okay," he whispered. "But if you're lying—" They reached Thomas's car just as the Lincoln pulled up to the curb. Two men in dark suits stepped out. "Drive," Michael said, ducking down in the seat. Thomas didn't need to be told twice. He pulled into traffic, watching the Lincoln fall behind in his rearview mirror. But he knew they weren't safe. Caldwell's men would be watching all the obvious places: his penthouse, his office, the major hotels. Then he remembered something Sarah had mentioned in high school during their many late-night conversations. A dream of living in the village, in one of those artsy lofts with big windows. It was a long shot, but "I think I know where your mother might be," he told Michael. "But we have to be careful. These men, they've been watching her for years." "Why?" Michael asked. "What did she do?" "She saw something she wasn't supposed to see, something about your father." "He's not my father," Michael cut in fiercely. "He may have paid for my school, but he's never been my father. I've seen him, you know, watching me at school events, never introducing himself, just watching." Thomas glanced at the boy, seeing the pain and anger in his expression. "How did you find out about him?" "I overheard the headmaster talking about my benefactor last year, did some digging in the school records, found out about the payments from his company." Michael's voice was bitter. "After that, I started paying attention, noticing the black cars that sometimes followed our school buses. The men in suits who showed up at sports events. Smart kid, just like his mother." "That's why you ran away?" Michael nodded. "I needed to find her, to understand." Thomas turned onto a narrow street in Greenwich Village. "We'll find her, Michael. But first we need to—" He stopped mid-sentence. Sarah was standing on the corner, staring at a faded "Missing Child" poster. Her own son's face looked back at her from the paper she'd just taped to the wall. As Thomas parked the car, he saw her shoulders shaking with sobs. She had no idea her son was sitting 30 feet away, or that everything was about to change, but someone else had seen them too. A payphone on the corner began to ring, its shrill tone cutting through the afternoon air like a warning. The past and present were about to collide, and there would be no turning back. "Mom!" Michael's voice cut through the busy street noise before Thomas could stop him. The boy was already out of the car, running towards Sarah. Sarah turned to use her face a mixture of joy and terror. "Michael!" She grabbed him, pulling him close, then looked around frantically. No, you can't be here. It's not safe." Thomas approached quickly. "Sarah, we need to get off the street. Now." The payphone continued ringing, its sound somehow ominous in the afternoon air. A black Lincoln appeared at the end of the block. "This way," Sarah said, grabbing Michael's hand. She led them down a narrow alley between two buildings, then through a rusty door that blended with the brick wall. Inside was a small, abandoned warehouse space. Dust covered old boxes and forgotten furniture, while sunlight filtered through dirty windows high above. "I've been staying here," Sarah explained, leading them to a makeshift living space in the corner. A worn mattress, some cardboard boxes serving as furniture, and a small radio playing Whitney Houston's "I Wanna Dance with Somebody" at low volume. The owner died years ago. The city hasn't figured out what to do with it yet. Michael looked around, taking in his mother's living conditions. His prep school uniform seemed glaringly out of place. "Mom, why?" His voice cracked. "Why didn't you ever contact me?" Sarah touched his face gently. "To protect you. Everything I did was to protect you." She turned to Thomas. "They'll find us here, they always do." "Not this time," Thomas said firmly. He pulled out Cooper's envelope. "We have proof now, Sarah. Real proof of what was happening at the factory. Bank records, shipping manifests, everything." Sarah's eyes widened as she looked at the documents. Frank Cooper. He kept these all these years. He wanted to make things right. "But Caldwell's men—" Thomas paused, remembering Cooper's fate. "They killed him, didn't they?" Sarah's voice was hollow. Michael picked up one of the papers. "Who's Victor Caldwell?" Sarah and Thomas exchanged looks. Before either could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the empty warehouse. "Come out, Sarah." Victor Caldwell's voice resonated off the high ceiling. "It's time we had a family discussion." Sarah pushed Michael behind her. Thomas moved to stand between them and the direction of Caldwell's voice. "It's over, Victor," Thomas called out. "We have the records, everything." Caldwell emerged from the shadows, two men in suits flanking him. His gold ring caught the dim light as he spread his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Let's be reasonable," he said smoothly. "What's your plan here, Thomas?" "Go to the police. The same police department that's been looking the other way for 15 years. Go to the papers. I own half the editors in the city." He took a step forward. "Or maybe you'll use the documents, 15-year-old photocopies that could have been forged by anyone. Documents that mysteriously appeared just when you needed them." Thomas felt a flicker of doubt. Caldwell had clearly planned for every contingency. "You kept me away from my son," Sarah said, her voice trembling with anger. "Forced me to live like an animal." "I gave him everything," Caldwell countered. "The best schools, opportunities you could never provide, and I kept you alive, Sarah. Don't forget that. Others wanted a more permanent solution." Michael stepped out from behind his mother. "You never gave me anything. You just watched. Like I was some kind of experiment." Caldwell's expression softened slightly. "You're my son, Michael. Everything I did was to protect my interests, my legacy." "I'm not your legacy," Michael spat. "I'm what you created when you destroyed my mother's life." Thomas watched the exchange, noticing something crucial. Caldwell's men had moved away from the entrance, focusing on their boss's confrontation. The door was clear. "Sarah," he whispered, "when I say run—" But Sarah was already moving, grabbing a heavy piece of wood from nearby. With strength born of years on the street, she swung it at the nearest thug, catching him in the knee. He went down with a cry. "Run!" Thomas shouted, tackling the second man as Sarah pulled Michael toward the door. Caldwell reached inside his jacket, but Thomas kicked out, catching the older man's hand. Something metallic skittered across the floor. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Sarah and Michael reached the door. Caldwell's remaining man pulled a gun. Thomas dove for the object Caldwell had dropped, a small tape recorder. A shot rang out, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Thomas looked up, expecting pain, but instead saw Caldwell clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his expensive suit. In the doorway stood two uniformed police officers, guns drawn, and behind them was Frank Cooper. "You're not dead," Thomas gasped. Cooper stepped forward, looking grimmer and more determined than he had at the diner. "No, but I knew they'd try once I started talking. The police have been recording everything since then." He nodded at the tape recorder, including Mr. Caldwell's fascinating confession just now. More officers poured into the warehouse. Caldwell and his men were quickly handcuffed, their faces showing the shock of men unused to being held accountable. Sarah held Michael tightly as they watched Caldwell being led away. The man's composed facade had cracked, revealing the desperation beneath. "This isn't over," he snarled. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." But his threat sounded hollow now, like the last gasps of a dying era. Outside, the setting sun painted the Manhattan skyline in shades of orange and pink. A new Beastie Boys song played from a passing car, mixing with the sound of police sirens. The nightmare that had started in a small Colorado town in 1972 was finally ending on a crisp New York evening in 1987. But as Thomas watched Sarah and Michael clinging to each other, he realized something else was just beginning. What none of them knew was that Caldwell had one final card to play, a secret that would force them to make the hardest choice of all. The following week passed in a blur of police statements and legal meetings. Thomas arranged for Sarah and Michael to stay in a secure suite at the Plaza Hotel, though Sarah was initially reluctant to accept such luxury after years on the street. The marble bathrooms and silk sheets seemed to belong to another world entirely. One evening, Thomas found her standing at the window, staring at the city lights while Cyndi Lauper's Time After Time played softly on the room's stereo. Michael was asleep in the adjacent room, finally looking peaceful after days of processing everything that had happened. "I keep waiting to wake up," Sarah said quietly. "Back on my mattress in that warehouse. All of this just a dream." Thomas joined her at the window. "It's real, Sarah. You're free. Both of you." She turned to face him, her eyes glistening. "Are we? Caldwell's lawyers are already working to dismiss the evidence. Frank's testimony, the documents. They're trying to discredit everything." "Let them try," Thomas said firmly. "Times are changing. People are tired of men like Caldwell thinking they're above the law." But Sarah's words proved prophetic. The next morning, Thomas's phone rang during a meeting with his company's board of directors. It was Detective Martinez, who'd been handling the case. "We have a problem," Martinez said without preamble. "Caldwell's asking to meet with Sarah, says he has information about her parents." Thomas felt his stomach tighten. "Her parents died in a car accident in '79. "That's just it, Mr. Harrison. According to Caldwell, they didn't." The meeting with Caldwell was arranged in a small room at the police station. Sarah insisted on going alone, though Thomas and Detective Martinez watched through a two-way mirror. Caldwell sat at a metal table, his expensive suit replaced by prison orange, but his demeanor was still unnervingly confident. "Hello, Sarah," he said smoothly. "You're looking well. Amazing what a few nights at the Plaza can do." "What do you want, Victor?" He leaned forward, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows on his face. "To make a deal, one that benefits everyone. I'm not interested in deals." "Not even if it means seeing your parents again?" Sarah's composure cracked slightly. "They're dead. The accident was staged," Caldwell finished. "Just like your disappearance was staged. They're alive, Sarah, living under new identities in a small town in Oregon. It was part of our insurance policy." Sarah's hands trembled. "You're lying," Caldwell smiled. "Am I? Spring Street, Medford, Oregon. Your mother still tends roses in the front yard. Your father took up woodworking after they relocated. They think you died in 1972. It was easier that way." Through the mirror, Thomas saw Sarah's face go pale. The details were too specific to be a bluff. "All these years," Sarah's voice cracked, "they were alive, safe and comfortable, as long as you stayed away." As long as what you saw in that warehouse remained buried, Caldwell's eyes glittered. I'm offering you a chance to see them again. Drop the charges, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and I'll provide their exact location. You can be a family again. Sarah stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. And what about Michael? What about justice? Justice? Caldwell scoffed. Look at the bigger picture, Sarah. The charges won't stick, my lawyers will make sure of that. But your parents and new identities, their safety, that's entirely in my hands. Even from in here, I have reach. The threat was clear. Sarah walked out without another word, but Thomas saw the conflict in her eyes. In the hallway, she leaned against the wall, taking shaky breaths. He's manipulating you, Thomas said gently. But what if he's telling the truth? My parents are alive all this time. Her voice broke. What am I supposed to do, Tommy? Before he could answer, Michael appeared at the end of the hallway. He must have followed them to the station. The boy's face showed he'd heard everything. Mom! His voice was small, uncertain. Sarah reached for him, pulling him close. I'm so sorry, baby, I never knew. Are you going to take his deal? Michael asked against her shoulder. Sarah pulled back, looking at her son's face. So young, yet carrying the weight of so much pain and betrayal. Then she looked at Thomas, who had risked everything to help them. The choice she made next would change all their lives forever. But first, they had to survive what was coming. Because Caldwell's revelation about Sarah's parents wasn't the last surprise he had in store. In his cell that night, Victor Caldwell made a single phone call. When he hung up, he was smiling. By morning, the game would change again, forcing Sarah to confront a truth even more devastating than the fate of her parents. The final act was about to begin, and not everyone would make it to the end. Sarah stared at the small suburban house in Medford, Oregon, her heart pounding. After all these years, seeing her mother's roses blooming in the front yard, just as Caldwell had said, made everything painfully real. Michael squeezed her hand, while Thomas stood quietly supportive on her other side. They'd chosen not to take Caldwell's deal. Instead, Thomas had hired private investigators who tracked down Sarah's parents independently. Now, on a crisp autumn morning in 1987, Sarah was about to see her parents for the first time in 15 years. Are you ready? Thomas asked softly. Sarah touched the St. Christopher medal around her neck, a gift from her father on her 16th birthday. No, but I'm going anyway. They'd barely reached the front step when the door opened. Ellen Mitchell stood frozen in the doorway, her hand over her mouth. She was older, her dark hair streaked with grey, but her eyes, Sarah's eyes, were exactly as they had been. Sarah. The word was barely a whisper. But, they told us, there was a fire. Hi, Mum. Sarah's voice cracked. Ellen reached out tentatively, touching Sarah's face as if checking she was real. Then, with a sob, she pulled her daughter into her arms. Robert, she called out. Robert, come quickly. Sarah's father appeared in the doorway, dropping the coffee mug he was holding when he saw his daughter. It shattered on the porch, spreading coffee and ceramic shards, but no one noticed. The next hours were a blur of tears, explanations and painful revelations. Sarah's parents had been told she died in a fire after running away. They'd been relocated, for their own safety, by men who claimed to be federal agents, really Caldwell's people. They'd lived 15 years believing their daughter was dead, never knowing their grandson existed. You look just like your mother, Ellen said to Michael, touching his cheek gently. When she was young, a sharp knock at the door interrupted the reunion. Detective Martinez stood on the porch, his face grave. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but you all need to hear this. Caldwell was found dead in his cell an hour ago. Sarah felt a chill. How? Made to look like suicide, but before it happened, he mailed this to the police station. Martinez held up a sealed envelope. Tell it's addressed to you, Sarah. With trembling hands, Sarah opened the letter. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key. Dear Sarah, she read aloud, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. But I want you to understand why everything happened. The key opens safe deposit box 247 at First National Bank in Manhattan, What you find there will explain everything. Your father knows what I mean. Don't let my death be for nothing. Victor. All eyes turned to Robert Mitchell, who had gone pale. Dad? Sarah's voice was uncertain. What is he talking about? Robert sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his 65 years. I should have told you long ago, before you took that summer job at the factory. He took a shaky breath. Victor Caldwell was my brother. The silence in the room was deafening. What? Sarah whispered. We had different mothers, Robert continued. I changed my name when I was 18, wanted nothing to do with the family business. But Victor, he never forgave me for walking away. When you started working at the factory that summer, he recognized you. Must have seen it as his chance for revenge. Thomas spoke for the first time in hours. The money laundering operation, Robert nodded, had been going on for generations. When Sarah stumbled onto it, Victor didn't want to hurt her. She was still family. But he couldn't risk exposure either. So he found a way to keep her alive but discredited, and he used my wife and me as leverage. That's why he paid for Michael's schooling, Sarah realized, and kept watching over him. He was protecting his own blood. In his twisted way, Robert agreed. Victor was always obsessed with family legacy, even while destroying his own family. 2 days later, they stood in a Manhattan bank as the safe deposit box was opened. Inside was another letter, along with stock certificates and bank documents. Sarah, Thomas read, as Sarah seemed unable to speak. These shares represent my controlling interest in Caldwell Industries. By law, they now belong to Michael, my only heir. The old guard is dying, Sarah. Maybe it's time for a new generation to do things differently. Take care of our family's legacy better than I did. Uncle Victor. Sarah looked at Michael, who seemed overwhelmed by this final revelation. What do you want to do? She asked her son. Michael straightened his shoulders, looking suddenly older than his 13 years. I want to make it right. All of it. In the months that followed, the truth about Victor Caldwell and the family's dark legacy came to light. Under Michael and Sarah's direction, with Thomas's guidance, Caldwell Industries was transformed. The corrupt elements were purged, and legitimate operations expanded. A substantial portion of the profits went to helping homeless families get back on their feet. Sarah's parents moved to New York to be close to their daughter and grandson. The Mitchell family, now including Thomas, who married Sarah in a small ceremony that December, worked to heal the wounds of the past while building something new. 1 year later, Sarah stood in her office at the newly renamed Mitchell Harrison Foundation, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. The room was warm with afternoon sun, and Madonna's True Blue played softly from her desk radio. On her desk sat a frame containing her old high school photo next to a recent picture of her family, whole and happy at last. The intercom buzzed. Mom. Michael's voice came through. Dad's here. Ready for lunch? Sarah smiled, touching the St. Christopher medal she still wore. Be right down. As she rode the elevator to meet her family, Sarah thought about the twists and turns that had brought her here. From a scared teenager in a warehouse to a homeless woman protecting her son. And finally to this, a life she never could have imagined during those dark years on the streets. Thomas was waiting in the lobby, looking just as handsome as he had in his powder blue prom tuxedo all those years ago. Michael stood beside him, already as tall as his mother. Ready? Thomas asked, taking her hand. Sarah squeezed his hand, then reached for her son's ready. Together they stepped out into the bright New York afternoon, leaving the shadows of the past behind at last. The city bustled around them, kids with boom boxes, women in power suits with giant shoulder pads, tourists taking pictures of Trump Tower, but Sarah barely noticed. She was too busy looking forward to what came next. Thank you for watching today's story. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel to relive the magic of the 80s every day with our heartfelt stories. May God bless you and your family, and don't forget to click on the video popping up on the screen right now. It's another totally rad story you won't want to miss. See you in the next video, and stay awesome.